Welcome to the Consummate Athlete podcast, where we explore what it means to be a well rounded, happy, goal crushing athlete. Every week, myself, sports journalist Molly Herford, and cycling coach and kinesiologist Peter Glassford interview experts and chat through all of your training questions. We're excited to have you along for the ride. Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Consummate Athlete podcast. Peter has changed his shirt, but I am not even going to try to pretend that we are in a new place, a new location. Because by the time this is posted, we are on our way to Colorado. Hopefully, we'll be in Colorado, I guess, by Tuesday, but to try to give ourselves a little bit of a slack in the system, as we talked about
a week ago.
We figured we would batch record so that our trip would be a little less stressful.
Well, and we had a bunch of questions here, so why not? We're in the role. So 100%. I changed my shirt to give you the illusion, and hopefully you're along. What is that? Suspending disbelief?
Yeah. Sorry, I was really afraid your microphone was just gonna fall and just hit you in the crotch there.
Well, that's the content people are here for. Yeah, why else would you watch a podcast on YouTube?
It's true. Because they want to see my cool t-shirt that I've now worn.
That is the main reason the only benefit of watching is we show our t-shirts.
It's true, yeah.
So this is one that's available in the Consummate Athlete store. It says read books, ride bikes. It's black with white lettering.
But also you are lying. It's not the Consummate Athlete store. This is Strong Girl Publishing.
Oh, we didn't.
Thank you very much.
They're not in both stores?
They're not in both stores.
Well, then I don't condone this message. But I did see Strong Girl Publishing had a great Olympic post that I did share. I condone that message. And it was about where you could watch, especially the women's Olympic, the different times and days. The Olympics are upon us, I think.
Yeah, we actually have two posts of that effect, and we'll have a couple others coming this week. But we did one on all the cycling events. We just had one on the track and field events. And I think we're going to do just sort of a few of our favorites as well.
And to be clear, this is on the Strong Girl Publishing?
At Strong Girl Publishing on Instagram and stronggirlpublishing.com if you want to check out the Read Books, Ride Bikes t-shirt.
Okay, then maybe pick up some gifts for young women that you're maybe getting gifts for.
Exactly.
Summer birthdays.
Summer reading.
Graduations. Returning to school. What other things might you get someone a gift for?
She's really put me on the spot here. I don't know.
Is it Mother's Day? No, my mother's birthday is coming up, so maybe maybe that's an idea.
Oh boy.
Got one day.
Yeah. Oh geez, we really got to get her a present, don't we? Oh boy.
Well, actually, this is in the future, so technically we've missed it.
We've missed it. Oh no.
So there you go. So Strong Girl Publishing, great content. Olympics coming up. Any other news items?
No, that's pretty much it. We do actually, if you are looking for on the note of Strong Girl Publishing, we do have Misha Powell's book, Sprinting Through Setbacks. That's been out for a few weeks and people are really excited about it. That's been awesome. We also just launched our back to school planner. So if you are looking for, sort of your typical agenda that starts in September, you can find that over on the website. As someone who deeply loves planners, it's very exciting to actually get to make them. So
okay, great back to school gift. Okay.
There you go. Okay. Let's just get right into our grab bag questions. I don't think I should be allowed to answer the first one, so I'm just going to ask it. The question is, how high should my cadence be?
I guess this is a good one. We could have included this with last week's how, my heart rate's too high. Is it too high? If my heart rate's high, am I not fit? Sort of this high theme. We could have got a great sponsor from one of the local.
Oh my God, one of the 20 weed shops.
20's not under anyhow. Let's not get into that. So the cadence. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. I don't think about cadence a ton initially. We spoke about the sort of the trifecta of perceived exertion, heart rate, power. And then cadence is another thing you might have on your device depending on the workout. But I would say that's more of an intermediate advanced concern. I don't really stress on it. You sort of assume most people are going to find their way. You usually see that when you start cycling, you use a lower cadence in the 70s maybe. And then gradually you start, especially if you become a road cyclist, because you're riding with other people and also just because the speed and the effort's coming up, you generally see people start moving towards 80, 90, maybe even higher for some of the road folks as far as their cadence coming up.
Really struggling with that answer.
Right. And then you'll see outliers like Molly who use, 60s RPM across, they just don't shift. They're almost single speeding, but then seem to perform relatively well. Now, if you put them in different environments, there might be, a crit coming out of corners and cyclocross, mountain biking, like it becomes more difficult because you do end up in situations where you just bog right down and, you basically stop moving if you don't shift well and you end up losing time. It's not that you can't shift, but you just don't do it a lot.
Yeah, I would say like it's funny looking back at my terrible cyclocross career. I always say I'm not a cyclocross racer. I love it. I wish I was, but I'm not really a great cyclocross racer. The only time I've ever had a like fantastic race where it was at all impressive was the one time I raced single speed nationals.
Mm.
And I think it's, yeah, 100% cadence based and like shifting ability based. So
I have been debating swapping because your bike has the ability, your cyclocross bike has the ability to change it over because it's got horizontal dropouts that turn into like a normal
oh,
dropout.
ooh, I can race single speed. Rochester.
That's what I was thinking. And then I could take the components off that bike, which are needed at the moment.
I might have actually brought a bunch of single speed stuff back with
Oh,
me,
there
by
you
the
go.
way, but
Okay.
that's a podcast
There you
for
go.
another.
Molly Herford coming back to cyclocross.
I think we said that last year, and I
Yeah.
did not come back to cyclocross, but this
Comes
year,
really fast. So yeah, so Molly, if you're not achieving your goals, then that would be like the good first time. So the not achieving it would be you have trouble when it gets hilly, with accelerations, with starts. Anytime the cadence comes up, which is again things like attacks, downhills, flat terrain where flat terrain where things are moving very quickly, maybe rotations and a pace line, and you're finding you're getting dropped in those scenarios. Now, if you're doing triathlon or you're doing, tours or something, it may not matter. And if you're keeping up and achieving your goals, I tend to not think it's that big of a deal. You've always kept up in group rides, and you do. Well, I do see when you're in a camp and we ride with a group of cyclists. It's weird. It's almost like birds in a what is that? A flock, where things start sinking.
so I'm ruining the next generation of young cyclists.
Well, maybe you're dragging them down. I was trying to say that you sort of like come up into the 70s and 80s, and it's like more of a natural cadence. So yeah, so that would be the idea. So then the question is, how do you even know? So this would be where recording it. And most bikes now are recording it because of power meters, but you may have to put a sensor on. So the first thing is if we want to track this, if we suspect it's an issue, we would want to actually track it. You'll see this with power sometimes. People will start talking about power and they're not even recording it,
Right.
which is really weird. And they'll just claim that they're doing 250 for 3 hours or something. And you're like, I don't know if that's what you're doing. But with cadence, it's similar, right? You might say your cadence is high enough, but you might not know. So the first thing would be to prove it. And the one really,
Well, okay, first thing would be like the questioning of, is your cadence an issue? And that's what we just talked about. Like, are you struggling with
are you
X, Y,
struggling?
Z?
Do people say it to you? Which I wouldn't believe everything, but if it's like a lot of different people have said it, it might be. And if you look around, like you can count too. If you see everyone in the group around you is, doing 90 plus or minus would be a good bet. And then you're sitting there and you're doing like one pedal stroke for every two of their pedal strokes, maybe not quite that extreme, but in that direction, it might be an idea. Again, if you're winning, then I have no, criticism for you. But if you're newer or if you're not getting, you achieving your goal, then that might be something.
Yeah. And you have a note here too that it is variable. You mentioned goals and disciplines, but you also have variable different bodies. And I think that one is super worth pointing out. Like, for instance, my dad, 300 pounds, 5'10", big boy, lot of muscle. The man can get like more watts into, two pedal strokes at 40 RPMs than, most people can get into, with 110 cadence.
Sure.
And for him, like that's going to be way more comfortable. Like, is it the most optimal thing in the world? Probably not. But like, he's got a lot of muscle to push.
And I think it's tempting to say, small people would use higher and bigger people would use a lower cadence, or more muscular people would use a lower. I don't think it's always that way. So when I say different bodies, I would say just like bodies will solve problems differently, right? It might be, someone has knee pain. You'll see this in running too, where different, what is the name? I forgot in the last podcast, but like different cadences in running. We're just going to call it cadences. can affect your knee pain differently. So if you really speed up really fast, you don't have knee pain. But if you
Right.
are like clomping, doing like really slow, big strides, maybe you do have knee pain or vice versa.
And this is what Greg Lehman talks about, right?
Yeah, yeah, where you can mix it up. And that is really empowering because you could do, he called them form fartleks, which is where you just mix it up a bunch in your run to get like different loads and patterns. We could also just run off road, would accomplish a lot of that too, right? Up some stairs, down some things, flat, and you'd get a big mix. And that can really help. I think that's just a good general like avoid an injury strategy. But it also, if you had pain, it's nice because you can shift it. So even if you're riding and you're finding you have pain, you might actually play with your cadence. And as cyclists, we're very fortunate because it's actually very easy because of gears to manipulate your cadence to do something like that. But bodies might solve this. Again, bigger people may find, just really pedaling fast is uncomfortable. The cost of moving, more muscular legs around, right? Like it could be higher too. So again, this is where you're hesitant to say there's like 190 RPM optimal cadence that everyone with every goal and every body needs to follow. So again, I try not to have a ton of strong opinions about it until, it just seems like, okay, this doesn't quite fit with what they're trying to do. And or they're like, I'm cramping, I'm falling over, I don't make up a hill. Like there's a technique limiter. Or again, they're getting dropped because everyone punches out of the, I always say out of the hole and then it doesn't make sense, but from a slow, everyone got slowed down and then punches it. And this person's trying to shift to keep it at 60 RPM. Everyone else is hitting 120 RPM,
Right.
accelerating, and you're just gone.
Yeah. This all sort of reminds me, I think we mentioned it a couple weeks ago when we were talking about back 20 years ago. I believe it was Contador. Everyone kept talking about like you should never climb standing was like the big thing. And then it was like, oh, this one guy can't, but like no one else should ever.
Right.
Bad,
Mhm.
very bad.
Yeah.
And I would say the 90 to 100 RPMs being like the perfect RPMs is 100% a Lance era thing. Like, I'm not saying it was him, but like it's of that era where it was like, here's the way to ride a bike correctly. And I
Mhm.
used like air quotes or incorrectly, but we got these things in our heads as like,
Mhm.
oh, it's 90 to 100 RPMs is the RPMs you should be, running all the time. You should never have to stand a climb. You should always like,
Yeah.
there's just these weird things that just became like the Bible for cyclists, even though they're not really the thing. It's just like one guy said them at some point and everyone's
It's
latched on.
sure. And I mean, Conador may have used similar cadences and just he might have been standing like those are almost two separate things, but like both are good examples that because I think they used to say Lance versus what was the other guy's name? The arch nemesis guy from Germany.
Jans?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. He used to pedal slower because he was bigger and he wouldn't stand as much for sure. But then Lance had 90 RPM, and then they surmised that it was like this big great efficiency thing or something, right? But so all of that has a big asterisk, obviously. But it's also like they weren't that different, and it's not clear that that's why Lance won, obviously. Uh, right. But then the bigger jump, that's like splitting hairs. Like that's just racing. And but to then take that and apply it to everyone else at all speeds, watts, and goals and bikes, is a little bit of a jump, right?
Yeah, we just made it this weird dogmatic thing that
Hmm.
everyone just kind
Should
of
aspire to.
took for
And running
granted.
has the same, right? There's that like everyone should run at 100, I think it's 90 RPM, but 180 steps, right? So,
Yeah.
so running, they either count the steps at 180 or you could call it like stride. I am having a horrible time. We should have looked this up. Right? Sometimes terms just like leave your brain and people are screaming, which is great. I love that you're so engaged in this podcast. Um, but again, lots of runners run at 160. And again, this is a Greg Lehman. And I think David, your coach, talks a bit about this too. Like it probably doesn't need to change until which time we have like injury or like an obvious performance thing. But the performance thing is, we're getting to the pointy edge, and there's only so many ways to solve a problem. And again, most people start solving the problem, and this is if you look back to our podcast with Rob Gray and the constraints-led approach, this is the idea that there's, only so many ways to solve certain problems, but we want to leave it really open for different athletes' bodies to be creative and to solve a problem a certain way. If it's just a tiny log on the ground and we want to bunny hop it, or not even bunny hop, sorry, we want to go over a log on the ground, what I'd like to do is say, how many different ways can we get over this log? Because there's about a million. And it's so fun, right? You try and invent different ways. We could lock our brakes and like rock our bike over. We could bunny hop with two wheels together. We could bunny hop with front wheel together. You'll see some of them like nollie, which is, you leave the front wheel last. There's just, you could pedal kick, you could pedal kick standing. There's like, and we could go on all day. Rob Gray, who was on, again, great episode to go back if you are curious about coaching and just sort of movement acquisition, um, which I'm sure is lots of our listeners are, hopefully. He works a lot with baseball and professional baseball. And so you can throw a ball tons of different ways. But once you want to start throwing a fastball at 100 miles per hour, there's only so many ways that the body will allow that to happen. There'll be like tiny variations within per rep, but you're going to start seeing less ways that can actually be done, right? Just by the nature of how a shoulder and an arm, release a ball.
Right, right.
So this is where when you're a professional cyclist going up a mountain very fast, there's only so many. If you just pedaled at 40 RPM, I don't think you would do it. Right? Like there's only so many ways that the watts are, how hard you push down and how often. So if you only push down really hard, you do one squat on your pedals, and push down really hard, and then you wait and you wait, someone like who's like Pogača has already pedaled, 1,000 times and is way further ahead of you, right?
So what you're saying is Jonas really needed to shift on that.
I don't know. We're not saying that, but I bet you if you watch them, they're pretty similar, right? In a lot of ways. So,
yeah.
So that's the idea. So I think for us average folks, we can start just measure it. It could be interesting, a new thing to pay attention to, right? I always love when there's something different, because we all get so obsessed about the thing we have. I've been trying to go 30 kilometers an hour my entire, because that's all I have on my biking computer. And then I got heart rate, and now I want to hit my max heart rate every single day. And then, then I got power, and I want to try and get a peak every single day. And that stuff gets old about a week into having them. So we want to be a little more moderate with that. But cadence is a great one where it's not necessarily tied to effort per se, where you can see, okay, what do I do without paying attention? Okay, oh, wow, I only averaged 72 RPM, because I was coasting and stuff throughout the ride. Okay, well, what would it take to average 80 RPM? Which is a mulligan one I often look at in a steady ride. If you're mountain biking, this is less relevant if it's very technical gravel. But if you're out on a ride, it's not difficult to get over 80 RPM if you're proficient in this and you spend some time, you try not coast a lot. That's a great goal, I think, for most people is, can you do it? Now, some people would find that super easy. It depends a bit on route. And then you can decide from there, like, is there other goals you want to do? So that might be like a peak 1 minute cadence. Can we hit 120 RPM for a minute? Right? That could be a great goal to go after. We could go after peak cadence. Can you hit 100 and, like the track athletes where they hit 160 RPM for 10 seconds?
Right.
Something like that. I also look at the peak, 30 minutes, an hour sometimes, because sometimes, again, you'll see a technical gravel ride where there was a lot of descending or a road ride, you're descending a mountain. So sometimes it is, you climbed a mountain, you descended a mountain. It's hard to average even 80 RPM on a road ride like that. But you could still look at, peak 20, peak 30, peak 1 hour and see, was there a period in that ride where you were pedaling 80, 90 RPM? And for a road cyclist, gravel cyclist, I would say that would be, you would like to see that happening as someone's becoming more of an intermediate cyclist. Again, beginners, way too complicated, but intermediate and certainly advanced, this would be stuff that this should be, I would say that's almost a mark of an advanced cyclist would be like, yeah, okay, you want me to pedal at 90 RPM? No problem.
Right.
I know where to go for that, and I'll come back and I'll give you, what do you want? An hour, 2 hour, 3 hour? Perfect. Right. And you might see that actually becomes physiologically hard where heart rate starts drifting a ton an hour, 2 or 3 as you pedal at 90 or, oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Okay. So this is where you can start, is a watt, is a heart rate, what is an endurance ride? It's not just riding under 75%, but it can also now be like, what is that cadence, durability, if you want, right? Yeah. That efficiency. Can we hold that over time? Yeah, you could spend a lot of years working on that for sure.
I love it. And actually, our next question kind of dovetails nicely into this. So the question is, where do sprints fit into a workout plan? And I liked this question because it is in running, we often have, little strides in workouts that aren't the workout. So during an easy run, I'll have like 6 20-second strides, which is just basically a little sprint. But cycling, I don't think has them as often. You've added them a lot in the past couple of years to a lot of workouts. But sprints are weird because, normally when we talk about intervals, we're talking about like on the bike, 4 by 10, 2 by 20, three by, like, we're talking about like a significant amount of work that ends up being, 25 to say 40 minutes in a workout where you're going hard. Sprints, though, when you're talking about 10-second, 20-second sprints, you'd have to do a crap load of them to make it an interval workout.
Yeah.
So where do sprints fit in?
So I think let's do the short, quick answer and grab that. So I would say sprints can fit into certainly warm-ups. Like I think that's a no-brainer. Fit them in that way. A lot of your crit racers are going to have more sprint-based workouts where they sprint and then coast and then sprint and then coast, something like their race. Cyclocross racers are going to do hot laps and starts. I think, so that makes sense. So that's where I would put them a lot of the time. But I think you're talking about even strides and maybe you might call them form sprints. And I do think that you could sprinkle those in. Those could be a warm up for an endurance ride or finish an endurance ride. You used to see people doing town-wide sprints at the end of rides. I think you still want to cool down, but something like that I think is pretty okay. You'll see now with the zone 2 stuff where people get really like finicky that, oh, it ruined my zone 2 because I sprinted. I don't know if that's always true. I don't think that's the idea. I think you want to be careful that you don't belabor it. But that's where the main thing, I think, for a lot of adult cyclists, it would be remembering you need to warm up. Often in warm up, we do sprints. It's great for activation. It gets the heart rate spiked up. There's not a lot of fatigue that usually comes out of it. It gets you ready to work really hard. And so even if you're doing like a moderate session, if you sprint, then it makes the tempo or the sweet spot feel more tolerable, right? You've activated the muscle. You've really pushed hard. And then, your heart rate goes up and then, you can get into that work. You've warmed up. I think it's great. I'll tell you the podcast way back. This is not the last time Dan John was on, I don't think, but one of the times he was on, he sort of asked me, he said, what are the 3 most important things for a mountain biker? And I had to think. I said, oh, that's a good question. And the one thing that did come obvious to me is that you needed to be able to start quickly, which incorporates a lot. So you're standing, you get going, there's a bit of balance, you clip in most cases, into your pedals, and then you're usually standing and sprinting as you go away. So there's a lot in that statement of like, you need to start. Now, I'll get clients who race gravel, they're getting older, so they're not doing as many big pack starts. They're nervous about that sort of stuff. And they'll push back. They'll say, this workout wasn't for me. And the idea is that, again, you stop, which is a little scary. You're moving slow. You put your foot down. Then you get going. You put your clip in really fast. Then you work vigorously, right? And this is not about a race start per se. This is stopped, the group stopped. And we have to stop safely and not fall over. Then we have to get going quickly and not get dropped by the group. And then, the standing is, again, important. We really believe in that for, just making climbing better, the technical skill of it, using more of your body weight and your muscles, different sets of muscles to move the bike around. So that was one of the 3 things. I don't remember what else I said. But that was the sort of podcast where I was like, yeah, we definitely need to include this more, because it seems like when I think about if that is important, and there's studies for mountain biking and cyclocross where it's like, yeah, like what's a great predictor of the race? Well, it's what the start order is a predictor, but then the start, that first effort and where everyone is a great predictor of the race. You're not going to win if you win the first corner, but usually the people in the front are going to be towards the front at the end, right?
Right.
So then I was thinking, well, how often do we do this? Right? Because Dan John's thing is you should almost do it most days if that's the most important thing.
Right.
And so that's when I was like, well, we should be doing this, whether it's at max effort or lower effort for a mountain biker, for a cyclocross racer, most days. Yeah. And I would say I'm still not programming that as much as I probably could, but I do, again, it's where I've started stopping and then doing a race start to start any interval pretty much. When convenient, when safe, but that's, because it's super, again, I was at nationals and I blew the start. I've been doing it for 25 years and I still screw it up, and it's the most important thing in the race. So, I don't know if that answers the question. So the sprints then warm up, they're important. You can start intervals with them, and then you can do workouts like that too. So I think we were maybe going to talk about a couple different workouts we've been using.
Yeah. What are your go-tos?
Well, I really, right off the bat, so I was saying, okay, it's the most important thing. We should do workouts like that. So I have been doing more where it's, you can change the duration of the start is the nice thing, right? So it might be get clipped in 3 pedal strokes, which isn't very long. It might only be 3 seconds of effort, maybe less. and do, 8 or 10 of those spread over a ride, or at towards the end of a ride, or at the start of a ride. So very technique oriented. We could do that at a soccer field or something like that. We've done that going up a long hill. You stop every minute on the minute, and then you do another race start going uphill. And for a skill based thing, it's not just for the race start. It's because sometimes you have to get going on a hill, and the effort is higher and the speed is a little slower. So there's balance, but also sometimes it's easier to get on top of the gear versus a high speed, road sprint or downhill sprint where staying on the gear is very technical and hard and dangerous. The other one that a lot of folks have been liking is like an EMOM, which comes from CrossFit, which it means every minute on the minute. So I really like that, where we do a zone 2 workout for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. And then in the last half hour, you do 10 minutes or whatever. I usually do 10 minutes, but it can be whatever. Uh, every minute on the minute, you sprint for 10 seconds. So in this case, you don't have to stop. You could and do a race start, but let's just pretend you're rolling. You sort of slow yourself down, recover, and then you hit it for 10 seconds, and then you recover for 50 seconds. And every time I just leave my timer running for 10 minutes here, I press lap, let it run for 10 minutes. And then every time I see 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute, you sprint. And it's really neat. It gets quite hard by the end. It's sort of a long recovery on the first or one or two, but you get 10 good sprints right to finish a workout, good change of pace, a bit of shifting practice. So yeah, that's one. And a lot of people seem to really like that. You get your zone 2 in, your endurance, and then you do that one to finish.
I like it. I like it. And then let's just hit this last one here. The best strategies for balancing intensity and recovery, which is, I think a good one to kind of touch on right after we talk about this, because I think the tendency after listening to what you just said is now every ride we're going to hit 20 sprints.
Right. Yeah. So it's like in the dose a little bit, where you could do a lot of 10-second sprints and it would get really hard. And you could do that every day, and then also get your 2 intervals and your weekly race and then your weekend race. You do have to be careful, for sure. And so it says intensity and recovery, but it's probably, does that mean sort of like easy and hard? Is sort of how I read that. So the idea is that most of your time is spent going easy. There's always that 80-20 or 90-10 even. So it's tough. I tend to like the session, and this is what you were pointing out, that I've like changed a little bit on this, but still not a lot. Where I think most days should be endurance, unremarkable. They're just under 75% of max heart rate, under I think it's technically 76% of FTP if you're going by power. Yeah, most of the ones. Now, again, I'm not picky if there's a little bit of cadence work or sprints, wherever in the workout. As long as it's mostly easy, the perceived exertion for the workout is low, then I think those are low intensity. But I would say those are most of the days. So if you were training 6 days a week, you're a master, you're maybe doing 1 or 2 days that have high intensity where your heart rate and your effort are up for much of the workout. And at the end of the workout, you're sort of ready for the workout to be done. So you're going to rate that as like a 6, 7, 8, 9 out of 10. The other days, so that would be 4 or 5 days of the week, are going to be, 2, 3, 4s out of 10, where you could keep going for a long time, right? It's really, you're not at your limit by the end of it. Yeah. So I guess that's the best strategy for balancing them, right? Is you just make sure that there's enough days, and you try and plan. Like some of the balancing is sometimes folks will say, "Oh, I keep pushing that intensity workout to make it perfect." So they'll do it on Friday, but then of course there's a Saturday group ride or intensity workout. So then it's Friday, Saturday are hard. And that would be the other place where we're distributing. They call it intensity distribution. There's the how much of each are in the week, but then there's also like where are they in the week? Your coach does a lot of like Wednesday, Saturday, I think, for the like key workouts. Um, and in your case, the key workout's actually usually like a longer workout on Saturday, right, for running.
Yeah.
But it might finish moderate or hard towards the end, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's pretty common. You might see like Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday in some cases are hard or moderate, not easy. And that's what a lot of times I'll do more of that, where like maybe Tuesday is, might be something like we're talking about the sprints or the cadence work, or 30 seconds at race pace is a common one I use. But not super hard. And that sort of helps like get going again in the week, because Monday might be off. Tuesday is like, it has speed in it, but it's not, the perceived exertion at the end isn't going to be very high in most cases. Wednesday, maybe endurance or intensity. And then Thursday maybe is intensity. Friday usually is light, and then Saturday might be again more of like a group ride or a longer intensity thing or something. But it's always that spacing, right? Can you get 2 or 3 days of low intensity recovery before you go again? And I would say that's most people don't try and do intensity every day. That is like the cliche that it's all moderate. But what I see a lot is that, Tuesday is a weekly race, then Wednesday is my intervals, then Thursdays the group ride, and then Fridays, also intensity, and then Saturday I did the intensity Friday so that I could do the group ride on Saturday, and it just, it gets to be a lot. And it doesn't take that much, but you do have to push. We talked about heart rate, and that was the last episode, so
Yeah.
last week. If you're not finding your heart rate's coming up and you're feeling tired and your watts aren't progressing, then that's a good sign that you need to, you could call it polarize or distribute your intensity a bit more throughout the week, and pull that endurance back so that it's not, you're not pushing the zone 2, up into zone 3,
Right.
which you see a lot, right, where it creeps up.
Mhm. And we do have an episode, we should link to it in the show notes, of the, what do we call it? Like the 6 S's of like what to do if you didn't do a workout.
Right. Yeah. So there's like substitute, switch, swap, something. I'm not, you could just make up your own S words, really. And I think the main thing is that a lot of times you're probably better to actually skip the workout. So the idea is that like, you can't do today's workout. Should you, swap it or you shift the week or just skip it and continue the week? A lot of times, if you're following a plan, it's probably better to just skip it without knowing the situation. Sometimes, if the weather's better or you're really tired, it's okay to shift or swap, right? So if Wednesday was the intensity and Molly didn't feel good, or the weather was crummy, or she got busy, but it's like a quick run on Thursday. So she's going to do that on Wednesday, but then do her hard run, interval run on Thursday now. The dilemma there is that now Thursday's is pretty close to Saturday.
Mhm.
And so you might find that then you run Saturday and it doesn't feel great. And Saturday is long and hard.
Right.
So then you run into some trouble there, right? So that's where sometimes it's nice to just do, you know, to just skip it. Or the other option that a lot of folks don't think about is just shorten it. So just say, okay, it was 5 by 3 minutes and it's going to take 90 minutes for me to do this. Could it be half an hour and you just finish with 2 by 3 minutes? And there you go. 80, we call that 80% as a passing grade. Carry on with the week, right?
Mhm.
And so that way you did something, or you shortened, I guess was one of the S's as well. And then you preserve the rest of the week, with the idea of consistency being very important.
Yeah. And I think we've said this before, but it bears repeating. If you find that you are always changing up
Mm,
your
yeah.
schedule and training and everything is getting shortened or shifted or swapped or switched or whatever, I was trying to think of all the S words. It's probably time to talk to your coach and look at your training plan, because that sounds like your training plan isn't really working for your schedule and current life situation.
Hmm.
So I feel like there's no like, if you've done it 10 times in the past month, check. But like, if you find that you are pretty frequently not following the plan.
Hmm. I see a lot of, especially as the pandemic came, there's sort of a lot of people realized they liked their weekend days, so they didn't want to train on Sundays. So then, inevitably, then you train on Mondays.
Right.
And that's worked okay for some people, but as races have come back and this sort of stuff, right? Like there is a reason. Like Monday tends to be off because Sunday tends to be long. And then the work week starts, so Monday ends up being off. But there's lots of ways to solve the week without doing that. So you'll see that something around that Sunday, Monday can sometimes be the thing. So I have a few clients that do Friday as a longer or harder workout, and then Saturday as the longer or harder workout, if that makes sense. So it might be, you're shifting the week back a day almost. Sunday is off, but then that means Monday is probably going to be, either like for you, it might be strides or, a little bit of openers or just even an endurance ride just on the Monday. So that takes a bit of getting used to, but
Mhm.
sometimes that's the way you'll see things going. And that's the idea with plans, why our 3 month plans do really well, I think, is it actually fits people's schedule so then they can get through the plan and they don't, get bored and just throw the plan out because it doesn't fit. Because we take into account, oh, you like to always do your group ride on Tuesday, you like to take Thursdays off. and then you build the plan for that. And then it's setting you off on a better track versus having a plan that you're going to just manipulate from day one. It's not the greatest plan if that's the case, right? So that's the advantage of the 3-month made for you plans for sure.
There you go. We will include a link to that in the show notes. Anything else?
No, I think that's a good host of, questions. They're simple, but they're not easy, a lot of these. So I think a great set of questions. So definitely keep those coming, or if there's like follow-up questions, we can certainly go back to cadence. There's no reason we can't, look at it slightly differently if you have like a exact case for sure. So keep those questions coming. You can do that via Instagram in a DM or just even in comments in some of the posts. We can find it that way. And then certainly we do have contact page on the website as well.
Yeah. All right. With that, happy training, and we will see you next week. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Consummate Athlete podcast. If you want to hear more training, racing, and endurance sport advice, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating and review. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at consummateathlete.com for a weekly dose of inspiration and advice straight to your inbox.